I really like maps. History can be taught as a long sequence of events and dates, coming one after the other in an endless chain. In 1066, King Harold claimed the throne on January 6th, and then he defeated the Norwegians on the 25th of September before being slain by the Normans on the 14th of October. But history happens in places, in a geographical context. You may have noticed that Harold fought the Normans less than 20 days after the Norwegians, but looking at a map like this, you can see how far his army had to march across the entire country. It was in exhaustion that Harold's army broke formation and lost the day at Hastings. I can tell you that, but it's much simpler if I could just show you. That's the advantage of presenting history through maps. But much more importantly, historical maps can just be really nice to stare at. Lots of bright, vibrant colours and interesting shapes, scattered like art on a canvas. I used to like going through this book, History of the World map by map, just looking at the illustrations. I even made a book myself in this style on British history, and for my video on Italian history, I tried to make the map with pleasant colours. The colours represent the political entities of the past. City-states and tribal confederacies and great empires are painted onto the earth. They look so pretty that they can make you forget that they don't really exist. Take a look at this map, depicting Athens' dominion over the states of the Delian League. In what form was Athenian power experienced by these states? Through racketeering, the Athenians demanded protection money under the threat of obliteration. The subject states didn't experience Athenian power as military garrisons or colonial governors, and certainly never through light green paint, even though that's what the map shows. States are social constructs. They exist through relationships of hierarchy and obligation and patriotism. They don't exist in physical space. When we say a state owns a piece of land, what's really meant is that they control the people there, to some minimum degree. But this control could be exercised through a professional bureaucracy, or the homage of regional magnates, or even through the vassalage of an independent local government. Power can be a very complicated thing, but all we have to depict it are colours and lines. On this map, Athens is green, and the Delian League states are all light green. That's visual shorthand for some kind of relationship below full annexation. But which? A defensive treaty? Puppet states? You can't tell just by looking, unless I tell you. And that's the limitation of painting history on maps. As an enjoyer of historical maps, I'm also a pretty big fan of the map games, otherwise known as grand strategy. These games have you take charge of a nation from history, controlling its politics, army and economy, as you lead it to greatness. The map is basically the game world, and your nation's territory splotched upon it is your player avatar. The first one I ever played was Europa Universalis 4, covering a period from the medieval to the start of the modern age, where empires were built and the world economy was born. But as a game presented through maps, EU4 suffers from their limitations. Nations own provinces which all have an autonomy value, representing how much local control the central state has. You deal with this just by clicking a button every 20 years. There are no logistical issues completely centralising a province at the other end of Siberia, except the locals being unhappy about it. Everything has to be visible on the map, or else it can't exist. States, conceptualised as territorial entities, weren't the only institutions of power in the late medieval period. Decentralised tribes or international banks or trade leagues or religious sects in this period could be massively powerful, raising their own armies and public works. They could bring kings and emperors to heel, and they had their own incentives and own decision-making bodies outside territorial governments. And yet, because you can't show them as a block colour on a map, these societies, which have had no small mark on history, can't be properly depicted. Take the banks. Clans like the Peruses became immensely powerful through their wealth and network. They struck up deals with kings, like infamous warmonger spendthrift Edward III, taking the right to collect English port duties as an advance on huge loans. But how would you represent the Peruses in EU4? They didn't personally own any lands for a tag to occupy. Maybe you could give their mechanics to Florence? The family was Florentine, but they had their own desires and own authority separate from the Republic. The real answer is that you can't. All that exists in the game are playable tags and the provinces they own, so everything has to be depicted as a mechanic for these tags. In EU4, you take and repay loans at the click of a button. Where's the money going to? Who knows? Some non-national institutions exist in the game, like the papacy or the HRE, but only because they were primarily tools used by sovereign entities, so they can likewise be modelled as mechanics for the playable tags. And so, that brings us on to Europa Universalis 5. This is not a video about how good of a game it will be. It looks pretty alright from what I've seen so far, but I'm probably not even going to get it. No, what I'm interested in is how this game works as a depiction of history, and particularly, what looks to be a much more nuanced depiction of power structures. Control, for example, looks like a way better system than autonomy. The map mode looks so cool, showing the tendrils of power extended down the contours of riverbanks and coastlines, shrinking back at marshes and mountains. States don't exist metaphysically as territorial entities. They need complex administrative systems to assert authority over territory, and these are often hindered by the terrain and cultural friction. As controllers, control looks like it'll be the limiting factor in play. There'll finally be a dynamic reason to establish colonial nations, being unable to assert control over continents, rather than it just being scripted. The dynamic system does seem to lead to some dodgy outcomes. Did the King of England really have 4 times as much authority in Kent as he did in Somerset? But as a whole, it's very fitting control will be a seminal mechanic. A better depiction of territorial control is certainly great, but what I'm really excited for is the depiction of non-territorial power structures. I think I was one of the only ones super hyped when they announced this in Tinto Talk number 26. In provinces solidly under a settled government, areas accurately painted their colour on the map, there can exist peoples on the margins, with their own society and own power structures apart from that of the sedentary community. The map is too zoomed out to show each of their individual villages, so these peoples effectively couldn't exist before, outside of a modifier maybe. But the inclusion of a pop system simulating individuals in small groups in EU5 allows for special Society of Pop nations, those which exist through people and not territory, and that means they can overlap with land-based countries, as competing power structures often did. Even though they won't be playable, they'll still exist, and will still interact with the playable nations. But alternative power structure doesn't necessarily mean marginal. In EU5, the Perusies and other banking entities can finally be depicted as their own entities, existing through buildings and land owned by others, as building-based countries. The buildings aren't physical, as is the case with a lot of EU5 buildings, but they're rather a representation of the local banking branch and network. This, I think, is a great way to depict the non-territorial power of the banks. Another non-territorial entity, represented through buildings, though maybe less accurately, will be the Hansa, a network of North German merchants. Members of the Hansa completely dominated trade throughout the Baltic and North Seas. Playing as them in-game, you'll be able to construct trade outposts in foreign cities, and take tribute of fighting men in gold from your members amongst the free imperial cities. That isn't actually how the Hansa operated. There was no central authority directing things. Members occasionally met in a Hansetag, but by and large they conducted trade as part of their own small firms, operating under one Hanseatic brand. And the Hansa as an institution certainly had no authority to demand anything from the city governments of Lübeck or Bremen or Hamburg. Though it's really not more egregious than what goes on elsewhere. Playing any nation in grand strategy, you have far more close control than any real leader could have had. Real kings couldn't give real-time orders to armies on the other side of the world, and didn't usually involve themselves with building cloth guilds in towns at the royal expense. In a kind of hive mind, you control monarchs, generals, and guild merchants all at once. And I guess that's the kind of ahistorical compromise you'll have to accept for a playable Hansa. But, great sages of Tinto, if you're listening to this, I think I have an idea for an institution which could much more accurately be depicted as a building-based country. That is, the monastic networks. Abbeys like Cluny in the 14th century acted like multinational corporations, controlling huge chains of subsidiary daughter houses with massive endowments, franchised all across Europe. In the wars against France, the English distrusted the French monks of the Cluniac priories, so they began the process of relocating them and severing connections between the foundations and monastic HQ in Burgundy. But by 1337, this process hadn't yet been completed, which gives the player a situation to deal with off the bat. The Abbot of Cluny was one of the most powerful men in Europe, yet ruled no sovereign territory, which I think makes the Cluniacs the perfect candidate for this kind of nation. I believe the media you consume influences your view on reality. If you spend all your time staring at maps filled only with bright colours and sovereign territory, you might begin to forget that's not all the world is. The new Europa Universalis entry looks like it will depict a lot more of the varied and complicated nature of states and power, breaking away from the tyranny of coloured maps. And I just think that's pretty cool, especially if it might just expand someone's view on the world. And so, that's the odd reason I'm excited for EU5.